Yeah, we've heard that before.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
I don't know what to call it. Anybody?
Yeah, go by memory again. I was like,
That's probably the chair.
the, or what, Myrtle is not gonna be here.
Well, Rick Duvall said he was gonna show up, so the architect for 4:30 should be here. But again, we met with him and he revised the one page so that it removes the elevator and that's no longer an issue.
They don't have that, those pages though.
They know, but I could also pull them up, so.
They all get emailed to.
He did, but he didn't, Rick Duvall didn't, remember I sent it to you yesterday, he didn't send me the updated page with the elevator until yesterday, or late yesterday, so I just put it in there today, and then we printed them up. Everything else is the same, but I could pull it up on the, everyone can see it.
About 1 minute.
Doing all right, buddy? Doing good, how about you?
Brian said it was. You know,
Trying to stay out.
I know what you mean, it's hard.
You said it was going
This age is not very hard. It's like 4 o'clock.
Not in the winter.
There's John Hill.
Not in the winter.
That's right. So,
Today,
no, we got it yesterday. We usually come on third. Well, it looks like we're on time. Let's call this meeting to order. Thank you all for coming in. In terms of opening remarks, I just want to point out, we sort of changed the normal order of the agenda to address the new business, the new home applications first in the agenda. So that in the event you're here, but you'd like to get out of here as soon as you've heard about your house, you're welcome to do so. Rather than have to sit through the whole meeting. The other thing for those on Zoom, Ryan had included some updated drawings on the 430 Myrtle Ave house that we looked at last meeting. So they're in the package here, but I think they weren't, he didn't get them till yesterday. They weren't distributed via email. So we will address those when we get to it. But it's fundamentally, the elevator's been removed and simplified a little bit what we were talking about last month. With that said, any comments, additions, deletions, or criticisms of the agenda you'd like to? Anyone? All right. Next order of business, we have to get a motion to approve the minutes from our December 6th meeting. We approve the motions. Do we have a second? Second, I'm not sure who that was, but who made the motion? I'll say John seconded it, just arbitrarily. Any discussion, comments? Hearing nothing, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Opposed? Okay. Then on to new business. We have three. Count them, 3 new home applications, which was supposed to be about 2 years worth when they started this process, but there you go. The first is a resubmission of 430 Myrtle Avenue we looked at last week. Is the applicant here or their representative? Oh,
I don't see him.
okay. Then that will move on. David, any comments based on the revised information?
Just kind of update you. Ryan and I met with the designer, and if you remember from last meeting, we had some issues about the elevator. Was it existing? Was it new? Why it was placed outside the house? And then there was also a deck. It was a little confusing, and we were missing an exterior elevation. met with him, and what you see is the revisions to that. The elevator is moved inside the house, so that's not an issue. They have decided that the deck that they were planning on keeping is pretty much in disrepair, and they're gonna replace that. So that's shown as new, and we have all four elevations now as well. And I think last meeting, we had decided that it met all the basic requirements for roof pitch and so forth.
Here seem to certainly meet the. Okay.
You can see he's indicating new deck on the side. It's a little lacking in detail, but they are planning to replace it.
That's what I can say about that.
That's it.
Ryan, any comments? Any further comments on?
No, like David said, we met with them and really the only concern was the elevator shaft and they've rectified that.
I have one question. On the rear elevation, there's a window above, is that a third floor?
It's just attic space.
Okay,
There's no indication of a floor plan of that.
okay, well, it's got a window, and that's what made me ask.
Yeah.
Again,
Do you have, you can speak up? Yes. No?
no, we got a second floor, and I didn't know where that was second floor.
Right. That window would be a third floor, I think, right? He's talking about that window.
Right.
Comments, discussion? A motion to approve the application for 430 Myrtle Ave. Screen, second. That was Miss Linda. Any other comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Here and none, that's approved. Moving on along, new home applications, 636 Pritchard Street. All right, now, you want to put that one up too, or you? Are the applicant here for that, or the architect? Or no?
Or the architect would be David Graham,
No, this is
Pritchard.
yeah,
We're doing that.
636 Pritchard.
636.
Yeah. What did I say?
They, so this is the one, they contacted me like yesterday because of COVID issues. They're not gonna make it today. But again, I mean, this is a set of plans you guys have had for almost 3 weeks. This one, this as much as the other two, I feel really hits the mark. The only issue I have, which David talked about earlier when we were discussing it, there are a couple of roof pitches over porches that are just a hair off, but those could easily be can be revised and not change the look of the house. So provided they make those changes, I don't have a problem with anything that they're proposing to do.
David, you have,
I think this is a great example. The architect did a great job of really understanding what we're looking for. It really hits the mark in all cases, in my opinion. They did a great job.
so it's a knockdown, right?
It is.
And so the house that's there currently sits on one of those lots, or does that actually cover 3 of those designated lots?
Covers, so it's just one lot currently. There's one house on it. That lot is large enough that it could be subdivided into 2 lots.
Okay,
And I had lengthy discussions with the property owner when he went to go buy that property, and he knew that, and he was adamant that his intent was never to subdivide it. Really, his intent was to just renovate the existing home, but after finding out how much money it would take to renovate it and how much he would actually be able to do and keep it under the 50% threshold, it obviously just wasn't feasible, didn't make sense, so we decided to hire an architect, rip it down and rebuild it, and as you can see, he has no plans to subdivide it. He's gonna build the house pretty much in the existing footprint.
Yeah.
And that's what we got.
You're gonna will lots be consolidated, just out of curiosity, or will it continue to be designated as 3 separate lots?
So it has never been 3 lots. It's still just 1 lot. I think before the town was formed, at some point it might have been 3 lots, but it's always been 1 lot, 1 tax map number. So there might have been a plat at some point to propose subdividing it, but it was never recorded. So it is only 1 tax map number, and that's all it's ever been.
Okay.
And there's no change, there's no plans to change that, obviously, because he's built 1 single family house. And even though it's a large, I mean, half the lot is wetlands area, so half of it's not developable water.
Easier to see up there. Any other questions or comments?
I got the same comment on the front drawing. There's a window again up in the attic. I assume that's just a window.
Yes. There's no indication of a floor plan for that level.
Okay, and then my other question is on the proposed site plan is C-101. There's a red box in there. Is that the existing, where the existing house was?
C-100, yeah, that's the existing house to be removed.
That's the one that's gonna be knocked down.
Okay, so that's just an outline of what's there. Okay, thank you. That's all I got.
Now, were they gonna put break on the piling around the piling?
I don't know if they provided that level of detail yet. But I mean, there wouldn't be.
Oh, there's an elevation.
Looks like, it looks like stucco on here. See the little dots in it. Not brick.
And also the chimney, is that brick or is that?
Probably stucco again.
Mhm. Well, we had a nightmare at the house that we just bought. I thought it looked kind of tacky, not being brick in the historic district. So I said, why don't we take some little bricks and stick them on there? He said, okay. And then when it fell through and it had gone all down,
The whole thing was rotted.
the whole thing was rotted. It's
Timbers won't-
not good. I don't think it's a safety issue. I think it is a safety issue as well. I think what could happen with the fire in there.
That's scary.
So I think that's
Glad y'all got it.
2 things that they want to look at. But it's great looking house.
Stucco is one of our allowable materials for siding. Not IFAS or EIFS. but EFS, depending on how you say it. So we certainly have,
Well, it's a stucco. What is the stucco? It is stuck on,
Yeah.
stuccoed on some kind of.
Or is that,
well, EFS is an artificial stucco.
I mean, I think that's what she's asking, is that ethos.
You can't tell from here, but they can't use EFS because that's not an allowable material according to our guidelines.
Our houses are rather close together.
Mhm.
One fire could
Yeah,
jump
yeah.
quickly.
Good question to point out to them, maybe.
Yeah,
For their own safety too.
It's not allowed, the ethos is not allowed.
Like we did before, we can make a suggestion to use brick, but that's not a requirement.
not where we are today, no.
And you certainly can, you can stucco without it being ethos.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
the stucco over masonry is a lot.
Yeah.
Cement
Fine, I would think.
What we did.
and plaster.
Is there any other comments or questions on this one? We owner architects aren't able to be here. So
Yeah, I've got a question for you. Do we have, and I like conversations around the brick and the stucco because I think that makes a difference as well. But do we have the ability to even reject something because of the building material, if it's an approved material?
Think so.
Not at the moment.
Okay,
Well, actually, you do.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
You have the ability to reject and expect that someone could challenge the rejection and hope that they wouldn't. So I think our role as it's presently defined would be to make a strong suggestion that it's approved if they would consider making some alternatives to satisfy these kind of concerns, like what's wrapped around the columns. Or last meeting, we had discussion around a home that got approved that I think most of the board was not comfortable actually met the intent, but met the mandatory requirements.
right.
But I think our latitude is a little greater than that if we're willing to make the tough call. So.
But you certainly have the ability to reject it if it's not an approved material.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd have to go back and look. I don't remember specifying that there were certain materials that were mandatory.
In the manual, I don't
believe that we might have said it, recommended it.
Suggestions, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, we can't, the design manual definitely does not give you the ability to reject an entire project because they don't use brick around the columns.
Right, that's the question I was asking.
Yeah. But that's not to say it doesn't evolve into that at some point down the line, but right now,
Right. I think that's a subject for discussion under old business, which will follow all this, is clarifying the extent of subjective approval authority based on aesthetics, which is, I think, really inherent in nearly every ARB that I've been exposed to. So in terms of the appearance and meeting the design intent, it's my opinion it just certainly has the Pawleys Island look. The recommendations that may go along with any approval that we're going to offer would have to do with adjusting the roof pitch on those porches so that they comply with the 4/12.
Yep.
And a strong suggestion to consider an alternative to stucco for the chimney and column enclosures.
Yeah, they wouldn't have been stucco.
Yeah.
And
Would anyone like to put that in the form of a motion?
well, I'll put it in there if you'll just word it. No, the house looks great, but those two items could be changed for safety and for better appearance.
Let's get that on a motion, and then we can have some more discussion if we want to change a recommendation to a subject to requirement, okay? So I think we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
So now we can have an official discussion according to Robert's rule.
Okay.
So the motion is to approve, subject to the roof pitch being adjusted, with a recommendation to consider alternative materials for the column enclosures and the chimney, either stucco on masonry or brick or some other to be determined.
Or tabby, we haven't really talked about.
Yeah. So a possibility would be to revise that, to make that also approval subject to the brick on the chimney or some other material on the. And do we feel strongly enough to make that a requirement, even though it may not be specifically stated as a mandatory requirement?
well, you could not make it a requirement. So you can approve it and with a recommendation, whether they choose to accept it or not, that would have, because there are no teeth in this for you to force them to use.
Okay.
You can recommend it. There's no harm in recommending it. So I would say I would definitely make a recommendation if that's what you'd like to do.
Any other comments?
That was the motion.
That was the motion, and we have a second.
All right.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay then, moving right along. A new home application, 631 Pritchard Street. David, you were recused from any comment on this.
I am.
You are an active participant in the design.
Architect, designer. Heather is here.
Hey, Heather. Yeah. Is the homeowner here, or are you here representing the homeowner?
I guess I could.
This is getting confusing, I'm just saying.
David, is this across the street from the other one?
It is.
Yeah. They built a new dock out.
That's correct.
Yeah. Cool dock.
The Ingles. The owner here, property owner here for this one? No.
Kind of looks like a Manning house.
And then you don't have any comments to make? And
Michael Walker reviewed it.
Yeah, so I had Michael Walker look it over just to give another architect lay a set eyes on it. So I provided him with a set of the design guidelines and the plans and he looked it over and didn't provide feedback in the sense that made recommendations about what he think would help the design. I don't think, probably most architects don't want to do that for another architect, but he did confirm that he believes it meets all the intent of what's in the design guidelines and he believes it should be approved. And again, I mean, it looks a lot of similarities to the town hall. Obviously, David's firm designed this building. And at the end of the day, if David's office can't provide something that would check every box, and then we're doing something wrong. So it's a great looking house and not much else we can say about it. And I mean, you had some challenges with the size of the lot. It's a very unorthodox sized lot, just given the location of the critical area. So I think they did an excellent job.
thank you. Any other comments from the committee? In that case, I'll ask for a motion to approve that application as well.
I so move.
That was Frank. Second? Second was Green. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous, none opposed. Okay.
House sits perpendicular to the dock.
Yeah.
3 for 3. There you go.
There's a big oak tree there, that several significant trees on the property we've had to work around too. So it's a very long, narrow lot, plus trees.
Not as a clear cut.
That's it for our discussion then on those new business applications. We'll move on to old business. Now, when sending out the agenda, we've kept the old business discussion on potential revisions to the guidelines as a sort of a standing order of old business as we gain some traction and experience in doing this role, which is new for the town and for the committee. And we're gaining some experience. I think this makes 6 houses, right?
Yeah.
And,
We've got another one. I can confirm there's going to be one in February. So
ooh, okay. So we have gained some experience and we've come to understand a little bit the workability of our guidelines and our mandatory requirements and limitations imposed by president. So I have thrown out a couple of suggestions as things we may want to submit to the planning board and town council as amending the guidelines and or the ordinance as required. Based on the experience we've gained to date. Just to go through them briefly. One is to establish the authority, more clearly establish the authority of the ARB to approve or deny approval or approve with conditions, I guess, an application for purely aesthetic reasons. Saying that you met the 2 mandatory requirements. We don't really like the way it looks, but our hands are tied otherwise. And that's inconsistent with the authority level most ARBs actually have in most communities. And David, I don't know if you have an opinion
That's correct.
from what you. So we have the 2 mandatory requirements are our roof pitch and our second floor, 80% of first floor ratio, or not greater than 80% of the first floor. The second suggestion that has come up, and I think this came up last month, Frank, requiring rather than just suggesting the applicant and or their designer have a preliminary meeting with Ryan and the town architect or David Graham to understand the objectives. So changing that suggestion from a suggest to a requirement, so that we don't come to a meeting where you haven't seen the drawings or haven't had a chance to have any questions or interaction. Our hope, I think, with the inception of this board was that would happen anyway. It would be in everybody's best interest and they would be motivated to do so, but it didn't happen last time.
Hopefully it could be a situation where we can offer those suggestions prior to the meeting,
Yeah,
like stucco or brick or those sorts of things. And get them to maybe think about adjusting that before the meeting. If we make suggestions at the meeting, then really they need to come back.
right. As a reasonable.
Yeah, so I think we can shorten the timeline if we could make suggestions ahead of time. Then when we get to the meeting, Ryan and I, we can say, we suggested this, and you can determine if they did it or didn't do it, and why they didn't do it, and so forth.
But the first step in the process is having that dialogue occur.
That's right.
At least one of the applications, it didn't, and at least to the extent that the result was satisfactory. The other two items that suggested potential topics was considering adding ARB approval on significant alterations which could materially impact the external appearance of a house. I mean, where it stands now, somebody could add a second floor on top of the first floor, and they're not obligated to be at 8%, right? For example. And those sorts of things. So and I don't know how you would define a material renovation. I mean, there's a $1,000 limit or something like that, or materially changed, but we can work out the language. But if there is going to be a renovation or an alteration that would materially change what the house looked like from what it is today, that it would need to go through the same process.
So is there no requirements of a renovation to come to?
No. So I think that was just a flat out miss.
I think, yeah, we all.
I mean, to me, it's just a slipperier slope, because you're gonna end up with houses that don't currently meet the requirements, meaning that it's not gonna be 20% less than the second floor to begin with. You know, it's gonna be a box. They're gonna do renovations. I mean, how do you make them go? They're just not ever gonna be able to meet that. So where do you draw the line?
It's
That's
gonna be,
item one.
You know, or you could have a house that wants to have a renovation, but you could put an addition on it, but there's absolutely no way to do it and keep that roof pitch.
right, well, we're working on one right now where we're doing a ocean front
Yeah.
addition. It's got a 412 pitch on it, and now all of a sudden we got a 712 pitch attached to the 412.
Right.
You know, we're making it work, I think, but, you know.
Because at the end of the day, you're not gonna, I mean, the end result's not gonna be what you want it to be. I mean, you might have a house that looks nothing like what it is, and then you're gonna have this one little section that was added on that might meet the aesthetic you're looking for, but you're still, it's just not the whole thing. I think the reason we started with single family house, because that is a blank canvas. That is, okay, we're starting from scratch. There's no reason you can't meet what we're looking, because the finished product will look like
But
the intent is.
I think if we could pass your suggested first change, which is we have some discretion, then we get the renovations.
That goes back to the first bullet item.
Exactly, then we could offer suggestion and changes.
Because the scenario where there's a single family house, or single story house rather, that becomes the 2-story house where the second floor is bigger than the first floor.
Right.
We have no authority over, there's no submission requirement for an alteration or a modification at all now, so.
But Ryan's got some good concerns for that. I think maybe we could curtail that if we can get suggested.
In the last.
Ken,
Yes.
would it be, is it appropriate for a non-member to interject?
Yeah, I'm fine with me.
To the chair.
From the planning group standpoint, and please, buddy, y'all correct me if I'm mistaken, but a lot of what we discussed relative to presenting guidelines and everything was the intent. We talked about intent in dealing with architects, design people and everything. If, the builder would meet the intent, well, we have that same, I think from an ARB standpoint, have that same understanding or discretion in looking at whether they technically, meet an 80% rule. You can meet an 80% rule with a 80% of the roof, being offset, whatever. It could still look rather atrocious or boxy. But if they don't meet the intent of what we're looking for, I think the ARB still has the appropriate position to question that. At least from what we were talking about from a planning group standpoint, what we were trying to relay. I don't know if we did it properly or not, but all of this was aimed at attaining, an amenable approach, getting together, and working these things out. And if someone building a house or designing it, meets all the technical obligations, which good architects can do, and not meet the intent, I think the ARB still has the appropriate right and responsibility to question it.
And also, we certainly thought that there would be a preliminary meeting with the architect, with our architect and the town manager. I guess we didn't put that into a formal request, but we certainly thought that was the way it would work. And I think it has worked that way, except for maybe one time. But maybe we need to get a little more teeth in there.
Yeah, that's the one experience of not, just kind of exposes that that's a potential, it's not a requirement. We had one other, the recent approval, because under the premise of it doesn't meet the intent, that's allowing subjective authority,
Yes.
which we have two objective criteria right now. Less than 80% on the second floor and roof pitch. Those are objective. The numbers speak for themselves, but in terms of interpretation of the intent, I'm not clear that I think our ARB has not felt clear that we're, other than flat out rejecting an application on the basis of failure to meet intent, that's an authority that we have. So I think maybe some clarification there would, in my opinion, would help. John, you wrote some of this language. What do you think?
Yeah, hi, this is John Lemaster. I agree with all these proposals wholeheartedly. And you may recall that the Planning Commission basically had a slate of recommendations that included most of these things as well. And when that went to the town council, they chipped it back and they wanted to start with something quite simple and basic. And so we ended up with just the two mandatory elements, whereas we had recommended a lot more. So I think now that we have the experience that of these 6 houses and realizing that we don't have teeth where we want some teeth, that these are really great recommendations. The one thing I would say is that item one of the things I think the town council was worried about was having a purely subjective requirement. And that's how we ended up with these two purely objective requirements of the roof pitch and the 80% rule. So we'd have to work on some language around that, I think, to maybe define the Pawleys Island look or give some guidelines to the ARB as to what exactly the Pawleys Island look is. So it's just not totally subjective.
Yeah. Well, I think the assumption has to be that the application of a subjective standard wouldn't be arbitrary, capricious, or any of those other sorts of things. It would have to be based on some defensible opinion on why it does or does not meet the intent, right?
Right.
One other thing I'll just throw out there, I guess it doesn't sound good coming from an architect, but we started off with requiring an architect to prepare the plans, and that got missed. Of all the applications we've had, the only one we really had trouble with was not prepared by an architect.
Was the engineer.
But, well,
So, you know, I think, and this one on Pritchard Street, I think is a great example. I was prepared by somebody that really understood, as an architect, design professional, really understood what we were trying to do and the guidelines that we set up.
the other bullet on that list, and this opens up a whole huge can of worms, is considering adding the submission of landscaping plans, including planned tree removals and into the approval process. We don't have any tree preservation. You're having an IT issue. All good. So those are the.
There's been a lot of concern on the north end with the one house we did approve, and a lot of landscaping has been removed there. Is that
Correct.
And there's been some issues with neighbors and other people.
But to be clear, they've done nothing that is not.
Is anybody here for that? Yeah, go ahead and speak.
Well, we were just concerned because the lot right next to us, just beyond the gate, we're at 111 Atlantic. It was a tile lot. High tide comes all the way up almost the street. And that was not a buildable lot, but they got approval to put in a walkway. I guess Mr. Campbell did that. And this man bought the property, he's building a house across the street. He's putting a lot of fill in there right now. Fill is gonna be much higher than Townsend lots. There's gonna be a lot of water running in under their house, which already does happen. But then again, they were starting to just butcher some trees that have been there for a long time, great big cedar trees. And there is a critical mark there, but I told them that there's cease and desist. We did it at 731. You got a couple of big trees right next to me, but it kind of holds that lot right there from erosion and helps, get that tidal creek, keep it in control so you don't have a washout land. So that's covered under the OCRM statutes. And so we call it, I'm calling Ryan Fabry, the Georgetown County people out there, they got a stop order on it, but we are concerned that people come in here and the guy wanted just to rake all the trees on that lot so he could have a view across the street. But I think that's wrong, and it doesn't meet the standards for the control of tidal plots and tidal marsh on this island. I think people should be concerned about people coming in here and just thinking, I want to wipe out all the vegetation. It does affect the wash that comes in there during the high tides, which is a lot of high tides right now.
And that's been
all aware that that these high tides are more and more and more, and there's more and more water on the streets. And the more underbrush that's being cut, the worse the situation becomes. And like I say, we're the first house, we're the Robies, by the way. We're the first house past the gate on the left. And there's always been what's been considered an easement right before you get to our house. And it's a very narrow easement, but there's always been water there. And when we get any kind of high tide, it really is just like a stream. And if you do remove every bit of the vegetation, and there are a lot of cedar trees, we have a fence right next to our house, but there are a lot of cedar trees, but if you remove all of those, there's nothing to absorb all that water. And there's going to be water, and we have a dirt road past the gate. There's going to be water all over that road. There's going to be water before the gate.
There already is.
Well, there already is, and it's going to be that much more of a problem. And they're bringing truckloads and truckloads of fill for this new house right across from us. And it's higher, and so it's going to wash down underneath, like my husband said, Towns, and he's already behind that house. is like a pond when there's a lot of rain, because they have taken all the vegetation behind the house. About 2 years ago, they did that. When it rains, it's just ducks land there now. It's helpful.
Yeah.
And on my plat, which I have a copy of here, of my lot, it says that there is 10 feet from my fence, a saltwater easement. And I've got a copy of it.
Right. But the builder of this owner deck, like an easement, means nothing to that. Whatever it wants, so.
I think some of your issues, I'm not sure the ARB can,
I know it's not ARB,
but the landscape part of it is something that, you know, in terms of a landscape ordinance, I
landscape
appreciate your.
to them is just tearing up the trees.
But you did mention that this board has never, done much about trees and that, and
That's right.
that is an issue that.
It is, in my,
That I do wish.
Trees have been around.
yeah,
It shouldn't be done.
and I think that's where we're headed, you know. Pawleys is very, very unique for its existing landscape. Nobody else.
But once they're gone, they're hard to get back.
Right. Once they're gone, we're gonna look like Garden City.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why I keep
So,
it. Because it
right.
doesn't look like
So I think an ordinance is needed, and I think that's where we're headed.
And
So where we are.
the gentleman at this point, I'm talking with Ryan and everybody involved, the contractor and all. He hasn't violated anything. They haven't taken anything out beyond the critical line in the creek. He did clear cut his lot, which didn't need to be done. He could have built without clear cutting all of it. But he clear cut it, and they're filling in excess of everybody else down there. But just prior, I mean, they started to work the other morning at 7 or 7:30. And I didn't get there in time, but they cut one 14-inch cedar and one 12-inch cedar that were not in the middle of the lot. They were on the,
Very edge.
edge of the lot, which held the bank and everything from all the flow in. And I think if we'd have had time to talk, the owner seems reasonable about it because he's going to live here permanently. And I think we could have gotten some of it saved and still had something that he could work with. But
What we've talked about, you guys correct me, but what we've talked about is our initial stage is that when they submit a site plan for their new house, they need to show the existing trees on the site plan
absolutely.
and give us some authority to not allow them to cut it down. That I think is phase one. Phase two is implementing some sort of plan of what they have to plant back after the house is done.
Well, that first step that you said would have, I think, eliminated
It would have eliminated.
a lot of this clear cut that happened.
Is that, I mean, that's kind of,
I think the bullet said, consider adding a submission of landscaping plans, including plant tree removals to the approval process. So a landscaping plan is what they're gonna do when they're done. The tree removal plan is what they're gonna do as they get started. I would probably add to that drainage plans, which we're silent on too. I know over, for example, in Heritage, a new house application needs a tree removal and a landscaping plan and a drainage plan. What are you gonna do with your storm water or your tidal water, whatever? And we're silent on all of those at the present time. So,
What is the code of rules now as far as building up a lot and your groundwater goes on the neighbor line? What is that?
I mean, the only thing that's, you cannot create a situation that, causes an adverse impact on your neighbor. So you're allowed to bring dirt in for landscaping purposes. So if you want to bring in, everyone who's built a house in this island in the last 10 years I've been there, have brought in dirt to some degree. That's usually to bring it into, so it's adjacent, meets the adjacent grade.
Right.
So it's at least on par with what your neighbor is. Most people probably bring it in a few inches, so they're just a little bit higher. But at the end of the day, I mean, every property is responsible for the water that falls on their land. And they can't create a situation where they contour the land so that water flows to the neighbor. And that's really, it's the extent of it. And, you know, right now, we have the county enforce our laws for us. It's their call. If they say, I mean, I can't tell you how many projects that are in the middle. I've sent the county out to say, hey, the neighbors are concerned that they're creating a situation that's gonna cause flooding on their land. And not once has it ever been determined that some adverse situation was being created.
Does the county require a SWEP with submission of stormwater erosion plan?
They do not for residential. Commercial, they do. Now, if you go somewhere like Devereux, we have to do it's sort of generic, and we're not civil engineers, but we do some sort of plan that shows how the water will be routed. Yeah, routed. So you could build your property up, but you got to create a swale or something.
Right.
So that it doesn't flow onto your neighbor's property.
Ryan, what you were saying there is there any statute or anything that says what you?
I mean, there's no specific ordinance. And if you look at our flood ordinance, it'll mention filtered is allowed for landscaping purposes. Can't use it for, but I mean, there's nothing. There's no requirements.
But is there anything that says that you can't cause your neighbor a problem in building your lot up?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's what the words, and it doesn't say, but again, that is subjective. And I mean, there is some science to it. I mean, someone can go out, engineers can determine, the way that you've contoured the land, it's diverting water over here or there, but it's, most people are not looking to do that. Most people just want to bring their land up so that they're not the ones taking all the water. And I cannot tell you how many times I've had this conversation. It's usually people, they're okay when it's their water's going on to the neighbor. And then when the neighbor decides to do something after 50 years, and they just want to bring their lot up just so it's level with the neighbor, so that neighbor's water is no longer coming to their lot. Now all of a sudden it's a problem. And it's a hard,
I know somebody like that.
it's a hard conversation to have. And,
The lot down here was, I went down there a while ago before I came here,
Yeah.
and they had it up to level above the neighbors.
right.
And when I got down here to park, there were 4 dump trucks, took a left and went up there to put more dirt in there and fill it some more. Can I make a point to John?
Yeah.
John? He's not listening.
Which one? I'm listening, yes.
Hilda.
Yeah, I'm here.
We've done this 3 times before and town council has not acted on it. We kick around all kinds of things here that we need to handle locally in terms of ordinances and permitting and inspections and everything. And it's, I think, one of the things we've discussed and is still a key. And I think that's something we have to take up in our next planning meeting.
Absolutely.
Is there any other items between ARB and the planning commission members present that we missed here based on our learning experience over the last 6 applications? Anything else we want to talk about?
One of the applications, and of course, what David has here looks great, but one of them, we felt like that. Remember the open deck that had the roof over it?
Yeah.
We made the comment, well, maybe we should have it where the upper roof has to be overheated. But then again, what you do here looks great, and that's not overheated. This looks fantastic. But there was one we felt like.
But that other one, that would have been under the subjective, we don't think it met the intent.
Exactly. This does here, but that other one had that huge area that we felt like
Carved out.
yeah, we felt like that was not the intent.
And that's, I feel that was the reason for the ARB, because there are things like that where you cannot define it in black and white. You can't create an ordinance that says, okay, 20% less. It's very black and white, you meet it or not. But like Robert said, there are ways to carve out 20% and not achieve the look you're looking to achieve. So that is where it's incumbent upon the ARB to say, listen, not in a confrontational way, but say, listen, we understand you achieved what we wanted you to do in terms of reducing the size of the second floor. But it didn't reduce the boxiness of it. It didn't get any closer to that Pawleys Island look. And that's where I feel the ARB has to use its authority to kind of hone in those subjective design elements and try to push them towards doing it and get them to voluntarily change it. And not just say, okay, we're going to prove it because they meet all I mean, we don't need an ARB to address the 20% or the roof pitch, because those are already covered in ordinances. They're not gonna get a permit if they don't meet those. They have to meet those.
So an applicant left here with a recommendation to consider doing something with column enclosures and stuff, but you know, they already paid a lot of money for the property, so they didn't think they were gonna be feeling good about buying some brick. So he walks out of here with a suggestion, and that's gone before he's off the causeway, okay?
Right.
So the question is, does the ARB have the authority on a subjective basis to approve with conditions that are subjective? Or is it flatly disapproved because we don't think you met the intent? And you're not gonna nudge them between meetings to say we're disapproved because you haven't met the intent.
So the way I look at it, you know, it's, I don't want to overstep my bounds here, but the way I think you have like a design that took place today. I think it hits every mark, but yeah, is it stucco? What are they proposing to you? The design is perfect. There's nothing wrong with the design. Make a recommendation though. We'd like to see you use, you know, brick or stucco. And if they choose to use it, which I think they're going to, because, but that's not the situation I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the more boxy house.
Right.
Where they just don't meet the intent. And no matter, you could say, okay, we're going to approve it. And then what does it matter if they use brick columns, or it's not going to change it to the point where it's going to meet what you want. So that's where you say, okay,
Yep.
we need you to make it, it just doesn't look like what we want it to look like, and work on getting it to there. And that takes 3 meetings to try and come back and keep revising it, and so be it.
Question is, do we have the authority to do that?
I
We
believe
don't, we don't have, you don't have to enclose pilings at all. To my knowledge, do you? Pilings aren't required to be enclosed at all, are they?
No.
So how can we tell somebody you can't use stucco?
You certainly can suggest it.
Oh, yes, certainly. I'm all for suggesting it. I think that we ought to be in a nudging situation where we nudge people along. But you know, when we start putting our taste in front of their taste, I mean, like last time we talked about window grids. I don't think we need to go that far.
I mean, to be fair to the designers, if you don't want stucco, guidelines need to say stucco is not allowed.
Yeah.
Exactly. Or you know, you
They
can
don't
say,
even present it, you know.
No. We were talking about it being more of a safety hazard.
why is it safer?
Why is it safer? You must not have been here when we were talking about what happened to the house that we bought. I decided I wanted it faced with brick. And when they went up there, the whole thing disintegrated and had done a lot of damage.
The stucco, it rotted behind it.
Mhm.
I don't
Stucco
think
what?
that's a safety issue.
That could have been a fire in the fireplace and,
But you,
and it could have wiped out the whole historical district.
but I'm not trying to be argumentative, but you could have a faulty brick. I mean, David, you can make
Oh, yeah.
a stucco, you can make a stucco chimney safe, correct?
That's correct. If it's rotten behind there, it's faulty construction.
Right. You know, I'm from the south end, and I can just tell you, there's a lot of talk about this ARB down on the south end, and people are concerned, you know, when you start talking about enclosing pilings and that type thing, there's gonna be some resistance to some of this.
And I don't feel that's what this is aiming to address. I mean, I feel like, you know, it's more about the look. Either it meets it or it doesn't. And I don't think enclosed piles or brick piles are going to be the make or break or whether or not it's a Pawleys house. So that's not really what you guys should focus on. Not saying you shouldn't bring it up and talk about it, but that shouldn't be and no knock on the last meeting we had, but this meeting, we're going to walk out of here and I feel really good about the 3 that were approved. We achieved what this was supposed to achieve. I can't say I felt that way about the last time we walked out of here. I'm not saying that.
One house.
It just felt a little, you can't look at that house and say, I felt that was Pawleys house. So, and I get it. The subjective part, the hard part, that's you basically saying, listen, we really just don't like, you're basically telling that person you don't like the design. So yeah, that's an uncomfortable conversation to have with anybody, but that's the hard part.
So the question really fundamentally boils down to the authority to act on purely subjective opinion on whether or not the look has been achieved.
And I think,
And you have the sense that that authority is already present within the way the ARB is structured?
correct.
The only thing is does our guideline give the right direction? Is it enough information to give the right direction to the designer?
I heard, and that, maybe it does.
John is the author of the language, John Lemaster, the author of the language. Do you think it's inherent or contained that authority is here?
Well, I'm not the author of the entire document, but the intent was that it would have more authority than what I think you've interpreted it over the last couple of meetings. It's not one of the mandatory requirements, but the idea was that we're trying to have a subjective element in there. And, we were trying to work with the authority that the town council gave us, which was to only have the 2 mandatory requirements. We tried to build in as much as we could of this subjective intent as the Pawleys Island look. I agree, it's not a enumerated requirement, but we tried to go as far as we could. I would rather see it as an enumerated requirement. So I agree with what we're trying to do.
Do we need recommendations? Do you guys need recommendations back to John Hubbard? Does the ARB need to make recommendations back to you?
I think what we need,
Take the council?
I think what we need to do, David, is the ARB needs to reach a consensus. If these 4 bullets, or there's 5, or there's 3, or whatever they are what we want to take and present to the planning board and to council, or concurrently or consecutively, or whatever. And ARB
presents it to council.
and if the ARB is consistent or in a consensus that we want to go forward with some clarification along these regards, and then the planning board is also consistent, then it goes back to council again, and we'll see where they go from here. So I did speak to the mayor some time ago, and he said at some point, if these recommendations come forward, he'd like representatives of both the planning commission and ARB to sort of state the case to the town council.
Right.
And I'd be happy to do that as long as it's not in February.
I would recommend that you guys have a joint work session where you just sit down and spitball it and just brainstorm, not have it so formal. Say, hey, what are we trying to achieve?
Yeah.
Kind of narrow that focus, and then planning commission go back and work on putting together a recommendation to council, what is necessary for this to work? Because if you don't give this board the teeth, there's no point in it. So you gotta have the
That's where I
authority.
was going.
Right.
You
So,
don't need to be enforcing the ordinance.
right.
Yeah.
And what were your points other than the landscape? What was those?
It was from that initial email. It's subjective approval authority or rejection authority for purely aesthetic reasons. Have we achieved the Pawleys Island look? That's one. Requiring rather than just suggesting the applicant or their designer meet with Ryan and the town architect. That was 2. Considering ARB approval requirement on significant alterations which materially impact the external appearance of a house. And lastly, consider the submission of landscaping and tree removal plans and or drainage plans along the way from our experience here. Those are the 4 I threw out. I know the planning board had some other discussion regarding historic property preservation. That's not, I think, an ARB issue at this point.
And I don't think we're far enough along with that yet.
Yeah.
That's right.
So those are the 4 points. Can I ask for a motion for the ARB to forward this to the planning board for further consideration and discussion? Is that fair?
Yeah, I think so.
Anybody make a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Elton, second. Any further discussion? No, because we're almost out of time. We have 2 more minutes. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right. So,
The tree thing definitely needs to be in.
yeah, I think they all deserve some due consideration. I can understand and appreciate the reluctance of the council not wanting to create the ARB that's on that TV commercial where they're cutting down people's flower pots. But I don't think we're talking about that.
What was your thoughts on requiring an architect to draw the plan? I know we've already been through this one time.
Well, we change it to architect and/or design professional, meaning I'm an engineer, so just to clarify. I think the building permit requirements are architect or an engineer, and if you got the right engineer who gets the right architect to help them, that's not a problem. If you get somebody who's
You get a builder design on that, which,
yeah, but you get somebody for a couple $100 to put a stamp on it, and then you end up with,
well, it's not, stamp's not required.
yeah, for us. Oh, for
For the county. Structural engineering is required.
Structural
But the design and design intent, aesthetics, none of that's required. Yeah. In fact, you can design your own house as long as you got structure.
So we're okay, so John Hildreth is back.
I'm here.
Back in your court.
Yeah, we will be all over this next month, I assure you. We will
Okay, good
really
deal.
take it serious.
And Ken, remember that I think you're ex-officio member of the planning.
Yeah,
So,
Yeah.
I could,
so
except in February, unless you want to have your meeting in the Florida Keys. I think he just he's the wrong guy.
He'll have to zoom in with us.
I can zoom in, I'll zoom in. I definitely can do that. The last order of business is our next meeting. It's currently scheduled for February 7th. I'm not going to be present physically. John, are you able to be in town to?
Yes, I think I am. I will be in town.
Yeah, John.
No, yeah, John Felton.
Me. I
Yeah.
think I am gonna be able to be in town on that one.
Yeah.
I'm
So
pretty
you
sure. I
could
will.
share the meeting then, because the person sharing the meeting needs to be physically present and 2 other members to have the quorum.
Yeah, I can't say that I can do the rules of order like you, but I think I can.
what
share
time would it be?
Oh, we gotta pick, that's the other thing. We gotta pick the date.
What day of the week is that?
That's
a Monday.
Monday.
Well,
Isn't it?
You could
What's
Stay
the
over.
first Monday is when we go, so I think it's the 7th.
call me.
No, not before.
wait a second.
January 7th.
I don't know. Let me look at, I don't know. What day
Today's
of the
the
week-
7th.
What day is
It's the
it?
first
February.
Monday of the month.
Yeah,
So
so
This was on a calendar that we set up.
it'd be
at the
it'd be
beginning.
February 7th.
So we can make it anything we want. Right now, what's published is Monday, the 7th at 4 PM. We had some dialogue back and forth on this meeting. And for some, if it's going to be on Monday, an earlier in the day meeting would work so that you can get back home. For others, if it's going to be on Friday, later in the day would work. Normally, I could do it either, and I think you were pretty flexible, but it's up to us to decide when we want to have our
We
next
can only
meeting.
do it on a Monday in the morning.
Monday in the morning.
Yeah, that'd be good for me too.
Would that work for Frank?
Monday
Would that
morning,
work for
great.
you? I didn't hear you. I didn't hear you.
I said Monday morning would be great for me.
Monday morning?
Yeah.
Frank, how about you?
I'll have to check, Ken. I don't have my calendar here right now, but as far as the time, I think that'd be as good as any.
So would we be able to get a quorum if we worked over up Monday, the 7th, and call it 10 AM? Does that work? Then if, Frank, if you can make it, that'll get you back to Columbia before.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I'll check. I think I can probably make it, but I
Okay,
can.
okay. Well, that's what we'll set for now. If something happens in between that, again, it's important that we have at least 3 members here present to do the official quorum. If there's no other business, a motion to adjourn,
I move.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Thank you.
So I got someone who's gonna send me the plans yet though. I was talking back and forth. I give just 2 weeks between when I get them. What day works best for you? I'll just try and maybe set something up for the following week. I'll just set up for your office. Be like Monday, Wednesday, Fridays.
I'm usually here Monday, Tuesday.
But then if we went back and
All right.
said what we, and that wouldn't work. It's complicated.
Thank you. Feel good about this. This feels so good about it. But you know what? I said.
You know what, if you read the, we got. Very clear. Football stadium, senior.
I mean, you actually end up having more teeth there because what happens is you sign a lot there, you're signing on to allowing it. So here it's really. Right.
That you agree to.
So you're agreeing to it, like, so you kind of got it. Whereas here, it's like the town trying to do it, but you
Well, if
got,
it's an ordinance, it's an ordinance.
but that's just, if you're gonna do it, you gotta give them the reason to do it is you can't enforce anything, right? And then you guys are wasting your time.
I could waste my time on a whole lot more fun things. Take care, Ryan.
Hey, John.
Take care.
Good job.
Tim, hey, go take care of those tree cutters, will you?